Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another episode of Endurance Chat. I am Michael Zalavari, and I am joined once again by the ineffable Austin Zetzman. Good evening, Austin.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
I am doing okay. I am quite tired, but that is to be expected when everyone in the world is playing sport all of a sudden once again.
Yeah, there's things to catch back up on suddenly.
Yeah, and there's things to stay up and watch every single night. It's great. How about you? How has life been in the old FL?
Yeah. Current events aside, it's going well. It's extremely hot. We're going through a very record-breaking heat spell.
Oh my god, I'm
pile
jealous.
onto everything else. Yeah, so it is very hot. A lot of humidity. So we're taking our chances in the sun every now and then for here. So especially from myself, originally from a much northern part of the country, it's my body continuously reminds me that I am indeed from there and not from a place that would like sun a lot. So yeah, but it's going well.
You were telling me a few days ago that you got very sunburnt. Oh, poor Austin.
Could not confirm nor deny that, but yeah, I'm still recovering.
Rookie mistake. Hey, Austin, you know what's great at the moment?
What's great, Michael?
There's racing everywhere. And in fact, you actually got to go to some racing I think it's just over a week ago now, at Daytona, IMSA's return. How was the racing at Daytona? How was the experience of being at Daytona in the summertime?
It was more relief than anything else, because it's just it's been nice to go to a race.
Yeah.
I've just been fortunate to have gone to Daytona, which is one of the last sports car races that were really held until coronavirus kind of hit. So my ability to actually be at a racetrack and all that stuff was pretty recent, and we were going to be doing Sebring pretty quickly until that got suspended. But yeah, so I feel like I've had a shorter break than most, but still, I feel like with everything going on and whatnot, it was really awesome. Just from regardless of like how everything else was, just to kind of be in the stands and to kind of smell petrol burning again, high octane petrol burning. So, but yeah, it was great. I mean, it's under the circumstances, it is what it is. I mean, like, you know, you can complain sort of about the aspects of it that were restricted, but overall, I think the product that they put forth for everybody was appropriate, and I think that the race was pretty solid in terms of a short race that really didn't feature any cautions. So, I mean, if you're going to look at or safety cars, so if you're going to look at that aspect of it, where they really just didn't have any breaks at all, it was a pretty solid race, where you kind of near the end, you had an idea of who was going to win, but at the same time, the strategy was running all the way up until the end for some of the classes. So just from even like looking at it on the stat sheet, it was a pretty solid race in my opinion. But it definitely it's not a thrilling race with a bunch of accidents and banging and beating and banging, that kind of stuff. But there was some great racing though interspersed with there. So
yeah, it was a perfectly fine IMSA 2 hour and 40-minute race. It was basically exactly what you would have expected from an IMSA race. You also got on the stream, didn't you? You had a moment of glory as the cars were leading away on their formation lap. Did you hear about that at the racetrack?
I saw it. I actually was watching it. I mean, I kind of had a mind to maybe see, because they usually do that kind of stuff. They pan anyway. Not like in the moment I was going to do it, but like looking back, watching the stream as it was coming up, I was like, all right, maybe they'll just like catch me, because I had a large hat and I'm tall, so I stand out. Right, Americans would get this like the Price is Right thing. The most like outlandishly over the top personality person usually gets like picked and all that stuff. So I guess there you go. I went over the top fanboy waving at it. But yeah, man, I mean, gotta acknowledge you, and that's the thing too. It's kind of like I don't know if there's 5,000 people in the stands, but I try to kind of make sure that there is like some movement there, because I feel like that's everybody's looking like that too, or looking at it slightly too like that. So that was cool to see all the crews line up and kind of all the cars as they went past the start finish line for the warm up lap.
Yeah, because that was 4th of July in America, which I think is the first time that they've had a 4th of July weekend race in America in the time that I've been watching IMSA, because normally they're off in Canada over the Independence Day weekend. So, yeah, what was the experience of, like, actually being at an IMSA race for that weekend? Was there, like, tailgating and barbecues and shit like that, or did you have to, like, stay appropriately distanced?
I think, well, when you got into the facility, they did a like non-contact thermal temperature scan,
Yep.
which whatever. And then make sure you have a mask, or at least like your, all that other stuff. I think when you got in there, they provided you a mask, hand sanitizer, and some other stuff too. So if you didn't have anything, but they had like people walking around with like signs that quite literally said, "Please wear a mask," or "Please." Whatever it had,
That's
like like mask instructions and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
they just had a lot of staff there.
That's like people at like the Adelaide 500 walking around the track with like buckets of sunscreen and bottled water, just hand out to people, all about keeping people safe. That's actually quite nice. I'm not surprised, but that's actually quite heartwarming to see that an organization like IMSA is taking it seriously like that. She's good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a bit of NASCAR too in that as well, just because like they all want this to where they can actually make more money off of, that is legitimately a lot of the reason why they're trying to do this too, and to bring it back. And that's kind of like why we also need to have like them race, because not like stick and ball sports where you can kind of dig in a bit, for how long this is going to be. Like race teams are on limited contracts, budgets, sponsorships, so. And some of those companies too are going to be wanting, like answers to whatever's going to be happening if they can't fulfill them. So there's definitely an aspect where we want to have everybody back in the stands as quickly as possible. And I think for them, they understand that, as well as, for NASCAR coming there, I think they're trying to have more people there. So they're wanting to like prove that they can space people out, do all this other stuff. So I think there's a little bit more of an over the top aspect of it, because it was the first race pretty much in Florida, or like I would say the first like sporting event in the state of Florida that had limited public access to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we'll see about Sebring. Sebring is going to be different, and we'll talk later about how IndyCar at Road America a little bit too, if we want to talk about that regard, because that was a little bit more, because they were right on the edge of the fence sometimes, like really close to each other and all that other stuff. Sebring, I like the way that they're introducing it. And how they're trying to keep everybody separate but allow people to move around. So.
Yeah, okay. We'll talk a bit about Sebring once we talk about Daytona, and it seems to not matter what time of year we go to Daytona, whether it be the middle of winter or the middle of summer, one constant is weather, and we got a pretty significant weather interruption just about in the lead up to the race start, which ended up delaying the start by, I think it was about 30 minutes or 40 minutes. Was that the case?
Yes.
To be fair, when I was watching the replay, I skipped through all the weather interruption, but there was a pretty significant weather interruption. That meant that we had a starting period where a lot of different teams were on a lot of different tires, which meant that we had a very interesting first 45 to 50 minutes of teams sorting out their pit strategy and getting onto the correct tires and all that sort of stuff. But I was surprised at how quickly the track cleaned up. It was only 15 minutes of racing, and there was a very, very clear dry line, and you could see those who were on wets already beginning to fall down the pack. Was that as obvious from where you were sitting?
At first, it was confusing because some of the cars were definitely going a lot slower than normal, and so that was kind of, and because they were having IMSA radio broadcast, but it wasn't really loud, just kind of as per usual with that, and but they did kind of, once you did see after 3 or 4 laps what was happening, you're like, okay, they've got to be on different tires, especially with Tandy overtaking DPI cars. You're like, what is going on?
That was hilarious and a little scary.
Yeah, so once that kind of got figured out, and watching the broadcast too, Indy got confused thinking that he was like dicing with the Corvettes and BMWs, and he was, completely out of frame already by like the second or third corner.
Yeah.
And I mean, it stretched like that, but that was the thing. I mean, like it needed to go, and you could tell kind of how much time they needed, and it was like almost a good half lap. I mean, it's a second or a minute, 10 seconds kind of from just going to the pits to exiting.
Yeah.
that they had needed just so much time that it just ended up not being worth it. But I mean, for how it looked beforehand, and it was pretty much sprinkling, and it was raining, sprinkling, and it was just like the perfect. I mean, if they didn't have that lightning, it probably would have worked much better for them, because there was only like a little bit of lightning that when we were parking and getting out, and that's what pretty much hit like an extra 30 minutes on the delay immediately when they were pretty much. I think the broadcast was coming on, but if that did not happen, they would have absolutely had a much better chance at it. At like having a go at the strategy. I don't know if they would have been way ahead, but they definitely would have been much more even because they were behind the 8 ball. The 911 was pretty much from the get-go after they had to pit early for dry tires.
Yeah, so. that was the thing.
But I like the strategy tries, though. I liked it.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. You're exactly right. The gain of having the wet tires on for that short period of time, while it looked great on paper, it didn't really pay dividends on the other end of the stint when you had to take that extra pit stop to get onto the correct tires. And there's a saying in I think I've heard this plenty of times in F1. You want to be on the right tires for the right conditions. So I think an example is, I think it was Nick Heinfeld in a race around Spa-Francorchamps. He pitted 8 times to change tires and ended up finishing second because he was on the right tires for the right time. But in a condition like that where the rain was going away, there wasn't enough time to gain that advantage, unfortunately, for the Porsches. But they got close. They got really, really close in the end. And the battle at the end of the race in GTLM, GT Le Mans, was the pick of the battles. Again, typical IMSA, GT Le Mans carrying the team in terms of the battles. It was the pick of the battles towards the end of the race, and it got very, very tight at the end between the recovering 911, the 912, the sister car, and I think it was the number 4 Corvette in the first, I think now the second race of the Corvette C8. Going down to the wire for the last 20 minutes or so.
Really, realistically, still, that is where you find different strategies where you can just try, more, maybe thinking too much into it, but thinking too much, you don't usually see, or at least it's restricted slightly to Formula One, a little bit with LMP1H, that kind of thing. But like, I feel like in GTLM, GTE Pro, you just see a lot of these, like, okay, we've analyzed everything. The data's out. Like we all know kind of what we can do. We've even analyzed competitors and where their strengths are. Here's where we think we could take advantage of this, that. Like it's so weirdly like precisely calculated in terms of how they even attack the race weekend or like differ strategies, try to get ahead and advantage. That it's a real shame that we're kind of like losing that force kind in sports car racing that you just kind of see, and you're like, okay, fine. GTD is just like, all right, Lexus clearly was, faster. But with GTLM, it was, okay, well, the BMWs do look a little bit faster than everybody else, at least on pace, or at least they're pushing harder. But Corvette is working on strategy. Same with Porsche. They split their strategy. So it was, you can always kind of expect something else to kind of happen in GTLM. And if it doesn't, that's really out of the norm.
Yeah.
So, I completely agree with you.
And if it doesn't, the cars are pretty closely matched enough that you get a train of battling throughout the entire race. So GTLM, tends to deliver. And speaking of delivering, the Corvette, with that win, that race, took home their 100th American Le Mans Series / IMSA race win. 100. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It means you how to get to victory lane. You keep doing it.
Yeah.
over and over again. That's hard to do.
That's including like an entire season where they didn't win a race but won the championship because they were just that consistent. So, props to Corvette for that one. And a good return for the C8, proving that it's got the business. It means the biz. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I'm too tired. The quality of the GTLM battles was not reflected in GTD. It seemed, unfortunately, in GTD that there were clear favourites and clear beneficiaries of the balance of performance or the pace over the course of the race, and clear losers. So we basically had a Lexus 1-2 for the entirety of the race. They were pretty well unchallenged between the 14 and the number 12, leading to a 1-2 victory. However, if you look a little deeper into it, I think the biggest loser out of the entire GTD field is the Compass Racing McLaren. Did you see what happened to the Compass Racing guys?
I saw that they must have had something that got penalized where they couldn't start on pole, because I think they got pole, right?
Yep, they got pole. They got pole. They didn't make it out into the grid on time, so they had to start from pit lane and take a drive-through penalty. So after you do that on lap 1, there's no way of coming back. And they were, at one point, the fastest cars on track. Well, the fastest car on track, faster than the Lexuses. Lexi. And yeah, unfortunately, they were just disadvantaged from the get-go. So really bad luck for Compass, especially...
Yeah, they spun too after probably pushing pretty hard for however many laps consistently. So
yeah, so a real shame for them. But it really just left the Lexus to take a pretty well unchallenged victory. They never really looked troubled, which, you know, is a little surprising considering we've come to expect a GTD, you know, competition in most races that just wasn't there today or over the weekend.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they were probably by far the best prepared GTD team there outside of maybe Michael Shank, I would say. And with a 2-car effort like that, I feel like they approached it probably in the most professional way you could out of all the GTD teams. Not saying anything against everybody else that was in there, but I feel like the MSR team was probably the one, if they were going to be challenging, it would be them, you know, or one of the Porsche teams just hitting the setup pretty well, like the intermediate to green track setup, and maybe taking it to them. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, when you saw Lexus jump out and just not really see any challenges, and they were going, I think, maybe not one lap longer, but it didn't look like they were short pitting at all. So, the pace was consistent. They both were just gapping, almost consistently with each other, but just pacing the field. It was just kind of, all right, so I'm moving on to DPI and GTLM.
Yeah.
But I get hats off to them. I mean, with a reduced field like that too, I mean, a lot of people will take a little bit of gas off the pedal as well, and it's a shorter race. So the feeling is to push a little bit more intensely, and they were able to kind of manage that and kind of push through it, and they got a 1-2, which is not easy, regardless, and especially in the circumstances. So.
Yeah. I wanted to maybe quiz you a little bit on your thoughts on this. It was Lexus 1-2 from the Acuras 3-4, and then the remainder of the field were all the single car entries. Now, remember when we were talking last episode, me and Ollie, we mentioned that it was a little different to see so many single car entries from different manufacturers. Do you think having the 2 cars in the team for the Lexus and for the Acura ended up becoming an advantage over the course of this race?
Yeah, 100%. There's just more data being shared. I mean, there was qualifying, practice. You're trying different stuff. There's more opportunity for more drivers to get a read and feedback to the team collectively. And we know sports car racing is such a collaborative effort. It has been, and it is crucially now, more so than probably a lot of other sports, maybe, so that really, I mean, you're gonna find that advantage easier, with a 2-car team. I like the aspect that we have so many single car teams. I mean, they're all from different manufacturers, and that's just a bonus. I think it matters just from the aspect of manufacturers, that are wanting, or like at least teams confident enough in their manufacturers and in their future to want to continue, to immediately show back up, especially for this year in this championship. Unless a lot of this is just let's see if we can get this year and fold. But
yeah,
at the optimistic approach, in my opinion, would be looking at it where it does seem like we've got still a decent amount of manufacturers that are wanting to be in play still in IMSA, even through all this stuff. So that's good to see.
Yeah, it is kind of encouraging to see so many different GT3 marks represented, but I can't help wondering if a little bit of that may be some sort of sunk cost, literal sunk cost, in terms of the 1 million manufacturer commitment that they have to do season on season in order to get their cars on the grid. So, maybe for a group like Audi or like Lamborghini or McLaren, where that might already have been paid on for the Daytona 24 hours, they're like, well, if you can get there, please go, because, we've spent this money to get you guys on the grid, and we'd like to get some reimbursement back from that. Because we did make mention last episode that there was quite a number of teams who were missing from the grid, including a few Audis, a number of Lamborghinis. So yeah, I wonder if there is a sunk cost element to the variety in the GTD field. I mean, it was still great to see that variety of cars and that many different marques. But yeah, I wonder how much that's playing into it. I guess we'll find out further on in the season as we approach some of the different races towards the end of the season.
We'll see how that works, because I agree with you. I think there is a little bit of that aspect to it. And ultimately, this is kind of why that was in play, why this is such a huge, important deal, is that like IMSA gets this kind of manufacturer support because they have to submit this amount of money in IMSA. So, the positive, the benefit, and I'll add to that, is that while yes, manufacturers are kind of like, oh, fine, we probably just should because we already put that much money in this year. It also kind of keeps these teams afloat, whereas they might be struggling right now, not necessarily to go to the track, but just kind of be like, okay, fine, we're not probably going to be racing this year.
Yeah,
just we don't have the sponsorship. Can we do this next year? And whereas right now they're like, we still operate as kind of normal. We can work on what we're doing next year, but for right now, we're still working for we're still working this year, which is a lot better than a lot of other people in the sports industry can say for that. So
yes, 100%.
So whether or not that is an actual tangible advantage that we find next year, where we have a lot more teams than maybe other series around the world in IMSA because of this, then that is a huge bonus for IMSA, and something to look at for other series too, potentially, and securing more dedication from OEMs, or at least specific sponsors or supporters, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of double whammy, or two sides of the coin, because you'd expect with such a high upfront cost that it might deter people, but once you're committed, you kind of are committed, so you have an incentive to make the most of what you've already paid. So it's an interesting dichotomy there. Yeah, in the end of the race, though, we did make mention Lexus's 1-2 quite convincingly. In fact, the final gap at the line was over a lap, thanks to the DPI field splitting the two leaders as they crossed the line. So while it looks like there's a lap gap, it was in reality much closer than the results suggest. Finally, we'll move on to DPI, and this race was very interesting for the first half. You could tell who had started on wets and who had started on dries, and I think the Cadillacs all started on slicks because they plummeted down the order. But as the race sort of went through and continued on, it really came down to a battle between the two Mazdas and the two Acuras, and then surprisingly, one of the cars, even in those wet conditions, decided to blow up in flames. And the most surprising thing about that was that it wasn't a Mazda.
Yep. And the way too, I mean, just with how wet everything was, I mean, you were going offline and all that stuff. They were using a lot of curbs. They were definitely sliding it a bunch, definitely throwing a lot of weird torquey angles on some of the components. Yeah, for sure, you have to kind of think and assume at this point, until they prove us wrong, that Mazda is going to have some problem or issue, especially with the ICE. And it just kind of was shocking to see the unexpected stop for the Acura and have the engine cover come off of that. So I'm not going to say Acura has a problem, or that has a problem, but those things have been way less bulletproof than I would have thought.
Yeah, they would have. Especially for a Penske operation, you kind of expect Penske to whatever he touches just to be bulletproof. But it was quite a spectacular failure as well from the number 7 car. I think it was Castroneves and Ricky Taylor car, just fire sparking out of the exhaust on both sides under braking, and then even when it came to the pits, it was just, it was basically barbecuing itself on the entry to pit lane, and I think it was diagnosed as a fuel flow issue, just too much fuel going through the engine and burning out into the exhaust. But yeah, it was quite surprising to see that happen to an Acura of all things. Normally you would expect, as I said, anything Penske touches to be bulletproof.
Yeah, and again, it's strange too to see it happen with an Oreca. I mean, and the aspect too that these things, by no means am I saying that they're unreliable. They're definitely reliable. They definitely have the ability to like make it 24 hours. They've proven it time and again, but they haven't necessarily done it where like they're winning these races outright or like they're dominating these things. They're not having to push. Like it feels like they're having when they're running it. They'll get a little bit ahead, but they're like 5%, maybe a little bit more ahead. When Cadillac or when Mazda runs it, it just seems like they are able to pace the field. They're able to control the pace. They're not worrying about equipment getting damaged. They have both cars kind of finish, or with Cadillacs, their fleets finish. And again, comparing the Acura's reliability to like a Cadillac's, which has just been unbelievably bulletproof, as you would assume, but still, I mean, that's a stark contrast that again is very shocking for a Penske operation like that. So yeah, and again, for the amount of experience they have too, they're 3 years into this now, so yes. You'd expect kind of for this stuff to maybe go away because you're using mostly the same stuff essentially. So it's weird.
Yeah, it is. It is very weird. But what that did leave was the two Mazdas basically out front, unchallenged, to take home a 1-2 victory. Jonathan Bomarito and Harry Tincknell, very convincing in the end, winning by about 10 seconds. And then it was the number 5 Mustang sampling JDC Miller Motorsports Cadillac that led home the rest of the field. The number 6 Acura seemed to drop away at in the middle part of the race, and then the factory Cadillacs didn't really have any sort of pace advantage over the JDC Miller Cadillac. So in the end, it was the 55 from the 77 from the number 5. Now, is that a surprise to see the JDC Miller run Cadillac up on the podium when the factory cars couldn't cut it?
They've said that they've kind of figured out their pace. So I mean, I'm good. Who am I to judge when they say that they figured it out? And maybe they have, and maybe like just the switch is that they needed a little bit more savvy engineers, a little bit more just base knowledge of how the Cadillac works and is set up a little bit more correctly, just from a general base setup standpoint. So again, I have no idea, but the strategy seemed to be a little bit more different. They went a different direction, I think, with Mazda and everybody else. They went on dry. I think they were dries. They were on slicks to start. So they went for a kind of just a alternate strategy from what Mazdas were doing and the Acuras and everybody else kind of. So it was a few of the Cadillacs that did that. I think Action Express did that with the 31 too. So, but they just ended up working out where that they had much better pace throughout the entire race, and they were kind of the best of that alternate strategy to start the race. I think I'm not sure if there was anything that they jumped in between, but I'm pretty sure that's just kind of how it ended up. And they almost made that strategy kind of work where they weren't within shouting, they were within shouting distance. They definitely weren't within, kind of snapping distance at any of the Mazdas. They were definitely the pace of the field, but they had everybody else kind of covered on that, maybe besides the number 7. But I think it would have been pretty close between that and the number 5 had that not blown up.
Yeah.
In Consulate.
Well, the thing is, just looking at some lap times, the number 5 was the only car to get into the 35s besides the two Mazdas. Like even the Acura, the Acuras, pardon me, they couldn't get that deep into the 35s. They're all sitting around the 36s. So interesting note there, and that'll be a very interesting development throughout the season to see whether or not the number 5 car specifically can take it to the rest of the factory Cadillac buddies.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see it. I mean, give me anything that isn't necessarily a direct factory driver, to that end, and I will be extremely happy, just because I think that gives a whole lot more and extra stuff to the sport to kind of promote and to really have the benefit for some of these other teams to, get the TV time. And again, now it's just like, if we can get more diversity on the front of at the front of the field, it's better for the sport. And it's better for these teams, just because we all say it. Everybody wants to win. Everybody needs to win. I think a lot of these guys need good runs, good results, and good wins to keep everybody, keep the ship afloat, kind of thing. So,
and not only that, it also provides a very good advertisement for manufacturers who might have been looking at a potential LMDH program pre-COVID. If they can still show that you can get into this series and be competitive and win races, no matter if you're spending billions of dollars a year or thousands of dollars a year. If you can show that it's a competitive series with a lot of different winners, then that's a very good advertisement to maybe entice some of these manufacturers back into motor racing once finances start to level out a bit more in the coming years. So that was basically the race in the end. What were your thoughts on the overall racing product? Because I had some thoughts as well. I'll put it there.
Yeah, I mean, it's 26 race cars at Daytona. I mean, it's not going to be the greatest race that you've ever seen in your life. And Daytona, the Roval at Daytona is a tricky course. But a lot of that is because they're tough corners, and they also, they trip up a lot of drivers too. So a lot of inexperienced drivers, a lot of gentleman drivers, that kind of stuff. So when you basically remove half of the field, and then you also remove the inexperienced, the gentleman driver half of the field too, you get a lot more of, precision driving. You have 2 or 3 or 4 actual corners of overtaking. A lot of it is just one lane, don't fly off the track kind of thing, especially in the wet and drying conditions. They're not trying to do anything too crazy. So yeah, the overall product, I think, was not necessarily the greatest thing, but I think for what they could do and offer, it was probably as good as it could get, which is, I'm looking forward to Sebring more than because of Daytona for sure, because I think Sebring's going to produce probably a better race.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I remember thinking or saying to a few people leading into the race that, a return to racing at Daytona isn't probably going to be that great, because part of the reason that Daytona is a challenging event is because it's a 24-hour race and you have those large grids, which adds a lot of variability. I think once you remove that, as you said, things become a little too simple at Daytona. I don't really find it as a charming or fascinating course. I mean, there's 3 interesting corners. I've just probably offended a lot of people here, but that's just my opinion. So I didn't really enjoy the race. I'll be entirely honest, but the GTLM battle towards the end kept me interested. But I am, as in agreement with you, much more looking forward to Sebring, which is coming up this weekend. And lucky you get to go to another race meet, you bastard.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So we made mention at the top of the show that they're doing things a little differently at Sebring. Can you give us a bit of a run through about how that's going to work?
So they're doing it slightly differently. Everybody was sectioned off of Daytona. Infield could move around the infield slightly. They couldn't sit in any of the infield bleachers, and the people in the stands could not go in the infield at all. They were not allowed, and so you pretty much just had to sit in your seat the entire time, which again, 2 hours 40 minutes, it's fine, but at the end, it's nice to be able to walk around, obviously, with the 24 hours, but it's nice to just be able to walk around a sports car race and get different angles. You're just kind of used to seeing that all the time. You're not used to stadium seating and you're there the entire time. Yeah. So, but Sebring is different. They are sectioning off a lot of stuff. I can't get over to Turn 10 Green Park, where I usually camp at. That is, I don't know if that's even going to be used for anything, but that might be where some RVs can go. Otherwise, most of the RVs, I think, are going to be along the Turn 1, Turn 2 / Turn 12, 13 kink.
Yep.
Or 14, 15, whatever. That stretch back there where they can camp an RV. They're all going to stay in that area. Anybody I think in Green Park is going to stay in that area for camping or RVing. And then anybody that's just going for the day, is able to go in the midway area. So just along the front stretch of Turn 1, Turn 2, all along Big Bend and down to turn 7, the hairpin. So we'll be able to kind of park and then walk around there. The nice thing about that, though, is we have to wear masks and stuff. But if we're outside of range of like other people, not in our party, up to like 6 people, we don't have to wear masks. So we can kind of and we can bring coolers, that kind of stuff, bring food, drinks, that thing. So we can kind of walk around, do stuff. But if we're within range of other people, if we're getting, I think they might have concessions or something there too. I'm not sure. But if we're within there, obviously going to the bathroom and stuff, we've got to wear masks and all that. So I like that because it's at least that is a plausible approach to having larger crowds for some of these longer events that are coming up in the fall. Like obviously with spiking cases now, I feel like there's, you could absolutely say there's a wave coming, but I still think we have enough time where if everybody starts to get the message finally, this kind of policy will absolutely I think work for larger crowds. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't want to turn this into a political thing where it's like mask, no mask, blah, blah, blah. But I do just want to say that it is comforting to see, as I mentioned earlier, organizations take it a bit more seriously and, mandate things like masks and that sort of stuff. It is very different to what is happening on my side of the world, at least in my localized area, where we're looking at returning to things quite normally now. So it is still a little, I want to say a little scary to me.
I don't know. There's definitely that aspect, the selfishness, and I'm sure I'll get some hate too for my decision to be going to Daytona and to this too right now when we're seeing large amount of cases. So I don't know. I'm speaking very politically correct right now, but yeah, I don't know. I will be going to that. I will be doing what I can to stay safe, but it is a very unique scenario, and I absolutely desperately want to support IMSA in any way I can. I bought a shirt for this. I don't know. I mean, realistically too, I don't know how much this helps or hurts them, and especially for this kind of stuff, I want to show my support. And if I can go to some place that's that close, I will do it, and I'll do whatever I can to be safe, so that it's a win-win for everybody. So
yeah,
we'll
it's I'm not going to fault the decisions you make. I just want people to be safe. So be safe, Cookie.
All right, I will.
Good.
10-4, buddy.
We should actually talk about the race that's going to happen at Sebring, because there are a few little changes. I think there's a loss of 2 cars in GTD for Sebring. The 2 Meyershank Racing Acuras are not making the journey to Sebring. But on the other hand, we do get the return of the LMP2 class, which is actually 5 strong. So I think it's most cars. I think it's all cars that raced at Daytona. In fact, in that class. So Tower Motorsports by Sarworks, Aero Motorsports, Performance Tech, P1 Matheson, and Dragon Speed. So yeah, a full LMP2 class as well competing at Sebring.
Do we have a full DPI? Did you say that there were some people missing?
DPI is all the same. GTLM is all the same. It was just the 2 Meyershank Racing Acuras that I'm going to be missing.
Okay, gotcha. Yep, there. Yeah, that's where I'm seeing the difference there. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're gaining a couple cars, just in total car count, but, we're losing a little bit from GTD. I do think, that we're going to see. We'll absolutely see how this goes.
Yeah.
I think, too, because we have, this is less where I think the Lexi have the advantage, and I feel like they're a little bit more like the Cadillacs and DPI, where they run much better at Daytona than a lot of the tracks that they're at. Yeah. We'll see if their pace is consistent, but I'm looking forward to just seeing the crazy amount of different cars, and very little of them are going to have matching paint schemes or look the same. So,
yeah, exactly.
It's going to be really cool.
Cool. So that is our chat about IMSA. We've been talking for about 40 minutes, so good on us.
Pat myself on the back for that one.
Well done. I'm proud of you. Now let's jump across the pond, because also returning this weekend, amongst a number of other series, which are going to be crazy, is my favorite championship of 2019, my most anticipated championship of this year. It's the European Le Mans Series. It's finally back. Woo! I'm so excited to see European Le Mans Series back. I have been absolutely enthralled by the quality of this series in the recent years, and the fact that we're finally going to see LMP2 cars and LMP3 cars back in Europe is unbelievably exciting to me. I am over the moon about this weekend.
We also get some new chassis.
Yes,
Well.
we'll chat about that in a sec, but we should just take a look at the format for the week, because they're basically cramming the prologue and round one into a single week. So I think we're recording this Tuesday my time, Tuesday the 14th, and so today for the European Le Mans Series, when they wake up in Europe, they'll have three 2-hour sessions or 3 4-hour sessions. Oh no, actually that's not right. 2 4-hour sessions and a 2-hour session for the evening, and then another 2 3-hour sessions tomorrow, which will be their prologue test essentially, and then coming back later on in the week, it'll be your full round of practice, warm up, qualifying, and the race, and that's alongside Michelin Le Mans Cup as well. So pretty packed schedule, a lot of running to cram into 1 week. Feels a little bit like Le Mans.
Yeah, or just at least definitely a preview of what will be Le Mans coming up in a couple months. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of it's going to be a grueling week for these teams to kind of get everything together, and for the drivers not to crash. Thankfully, again, it's at Paul Ricard, so unless you're running into somebody, it's going to be hard to hit something.
Well,
so
see, you say that, but I remember when Porsche were testing the 911 RSR, the 2019 model, one of the drivers full on destroyed a chassis on the second lap that they did, so just put it entirely into the wall. So it is possible. It might not be easy, but it is possible.
Okay, fair. Yeah, you know what? Fair. You're probably not wrong there. But yeah, I also am looking very, very much towards this opening round for the ELMS. Obviously, the car counts are pretty good. They're really good for having not started the season yet, and for how many I would classify as amateur entries are on this list too is very cool to see. And just the staggering amount of LMP2s that are still hanging around in this class is just ridiculous. But it is now very, very, very much so LMP Oreca with a lone Ligier standing out and with Inter Europol.
Yeah, wow. So, I didn't realize it had gotten that homogenous. So we should talk about the entry list just to give everyone a bit of a refresher of where we are. 37 cars for the week, split into 15 LMP2 cars, 12 LMP3 cars, and we'll talk a little bit about them later on, because that's a very exciting prospect in LMP3. And 10 GTE cars, so a real growth in the GTE series over the off-season. You did make mention of those 15 LMP2s, there are 14 Orecas and a sole Ligier. We were expecting a Dallara from Thunderhead Carlin, but that pulled out at the last minute. And we've also lost, I think, second cars for, Inter Europol and Ultimate Oreca, so they've pulled out. There's been a few driver changes as well, a few high-profile driver changes, two of which are in the championship winning and championship second place cars from last season, the IDEX Sport Oreca and the G-Drive Oreca, with a new driver in each car. So firstly, Paul-Luc Chatin and Paul Lafargue, who dramatically won the series last year at Algarve, have enjoyed by Richard Bradley, who won Le Mans back in, I think it was 2016 with KCMG joining that team. So that's really exciting to see that team come together. And they've ousted Memo Rojas, who's joined Dragon Speed.
And that's going to be pretty exciting to see how Dragon Speed does. Although, not having Lapierre on the entry list, at least for them, they will have to make sure that they can fight through the field, because he will put another Oreca on pole wherever else he's driving in European Le Mans Series.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I like the shakeups. I don't, I'm not a huge fan of the 26, but from a driver's standpoint, that is a solid pickup.
Yeah.
So good job for them again. Yay.
We should just quickly mention 26. With, of course, Roman Rusinov driving that car. He's got Nick de Vries coming over from Formula 2 in that car. And stepping up from LMP3, Mikkel Jensen, which if I remember correctly, was part of the championship winning team last year. Reigning LMP3 champion Mikkel Jensen. So that was driving. Who was it last year that it was a tight battle between?
Euro International.
Yes, that was it. It's stepping up into a championship contending LMP2 car. That's a big step for the silver driver.
It is, but I feel like for them, they have mostly the setup down at this point, and it's the same car, same kind of track, a little bit different, probably with tire management, that kind of thing. But he's got a really, really, really experienced or really, really quick mentor with DeFries, and then obviously with Rusinov, who is as gold platinumed of a amateur as you could possibly get. So yeah. I feel like he's got he'll have a good stable to improve at. Now, how much he's gonna, be awkward about this these first few races, we'll see. Just because I feel like it's a whole different animal, and we usually kind of see some clumsiness with these drivers when they make the step up. But I feel like especially for how this works with LMP3, it shouldn't be that difficult for him. So I don't see them needing to take too much time to wait for him to kind of get his feet under him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It should. That's definitely going to be a championship contending car. Another championship contending car that we have yet to mention are the two United Autosports cars. So the first one, we're still familiar with that driver lineup, Philip Hansen and Felipe Albuquerque as a dynamic duo. That's pretty crazy in itself. Their second car, they've got now William Owen, who's been another United Autosports AM driver for a little while, paired up with Alex Brundle and Job van Uitert. So that is a crazy good car for the second of the United Autosports cars.
Yep, absolutely. That's another one that if you look at the entry list and at that driver lineup, you're going, all right, well,
they're going to get race wins.
Top 5 of that class. Yeah. At this point, yeah, they're definitely down for at least one or two race wins for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All the other usual suspects are there from last season. You got High Class Racing, Dragon Speed. We've made mention of Algarve Pro returning with 2 cars. Duquesne are back in LMP2 with a lineup of Gomendy, Hershey, and Terashenko. So that one will be certainly one to keep an eye on. Panas Racing as well. That's actually a really good driver lineup. Julian Canal, Nicholas Jamin, and Will Stevens for Panas Racing. So that 31 car is going to be a force to be contending with as well. We've made mention of Inter Europol and the Sol Ligier. A new team, I think, for the ELMS, BHK Motorsport. It's a British flagged operation with 2 Italian drivers, Francesco Dracone and Sergio Campagna. So I'm interested to see how they go. And then Cool Racing, Graf, and the last one on the entry list, the Rickard Mille Racing Team, the all-female lineup that was planned for Le Mans, is making their debut, featuring Catherine Legg and Tatiana Calderon. Now, they're certainly going to get a fair bit of media attention. How do you rate their chances?
Not too great. I hope they have some good strategy. Sometimes they'll have some decent race pace. I feel like that will be, any positive news that comes out of that team will be good for the sport, but I just don't see where they're going to have a lot of competition that is going to be at their level. Yeah. It's going to be a little bit higher than their level.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it will be quite obvious when Legg is in the car compared to Calderon, yes. But I think the standard of competition overall is just a bit too high for them to make any remarkable inroads. I will be I said the same thing about the Iron Ladies last year in the Kessel Racing team, and they ended up taking a podium in the first race. So it is possible, but I think just on the whole, when you look at the LMP2 field, it is just the quality is so astonishingly high that you really have to be seriously good to be challenging as a first time driver.
Yeah. That would be a more interesting race team in the IMSA series right now.
Yeah. Now, just looking at those 15 cars, who are you really excited to see? Who do you reckon is going to be taking out the race wins?
Probably G Drive, but if I wasn't a cynical asshole.
You said that with such disdain. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, G
That's
Drive.
exactly. I put it in there for that. Yeah, the United Autosports guys. I would like to see them do well. Dragon Speed, I think, might also have a decent go at it. It'll be cool to see. That was totally unintentional, but I'll take it. Cool racing. I just have a feeling Lapierre is going to put on pole a few times. They'll fade back, but just to have a different car up front that won't, kind of be up there. It's a different aspect of sports car racing. The pole sitter doesn't always, in this case for Lapierre, I don't believe he'll probably win a lot of races if he sticks on pole either way. So,
well, we haven't really talked about cool racing. I think their breakout season last year was very underrated. And I will say that if they get lucky with their driver placements, if they, for example, put Kanye in the car and get a safety car immediately afterwards or something like that, they could come back and win races because Borger is a super silver. He's just way too good for a silver rating. And then you've got Lapierre as well, and we've seen what Lapierre does. So it could pan out for them quite nicely, and it in fact did last year at Silverstone.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I just think that the way that this is now, the field has kind of shifted driver lineups, especially that I think the tide's risen a bit more collectively field against them, that it's just, I feel like it's going to be more of a challenge. But at the same time, like I said, I feel like they will be there and you'll at least see a different car up front, which is good. So, but yeah, I think, United Autosports, G-Drive will be good. Just usual suspects. If you see a name that sticks out, pretty much go for it. Graf might, stick their nose in something every now and then. We'll see. But, there's a lot of talent that's going to be coming from this to go race at Le Mans. I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I would. Unfortunately, I think Memo Rojas may be just a little better than Richard Bradley. But that's still pretty close in terms of driver quality. Unfortunately, the IDEC Sport team, the reigning champions, don't really have that wow factor driver like you have in, say, the G Drive Racing with Nick de Vries or in the United Autosports with Job van Uitert. So that's the sort of might play against them. But I'm actually quite excited to have a look at Duquesne goes this season. I reckon they might be a sleeper with Gomendi, Hershey, and Terashenko, and even Panis Racing. That driver lineup has a lot more quality than first meets the eye. So I reckon those two might be good to keep an eye on throughout the season.
Yeah.
Now, you've been wanting to talk about this for 6 months. LMP3, the debut of the brand new LMP3 chassis, the Ligier JSP 320 and the Duquesne M30 D08. The debut of brand new LMP3 machinery, Duquesne taking over from Norma in terms of the supply line for that. 12 cars in LMP3, that's going to be a really interesting championship.
Yeah, that, and as a season opener for a new chassis too, that is exciting. And they will have a lot of data to get, and we'll see how the teething works. But I think they've got most of this ironed out. Especially with Ligier, they'll probably have everything done, buttoned up pretty tightly, I guess. Yeah. So I think we won't have a ton of that kind of thing, but to see a whole fleet of new chassis is, that's what I live for, that kind of stuff, man. I love seeing new cars. So this is definitely cool, and both of them look pretty 2020. If I'll just say that. They look very, very much like there was a lot of over design with them, but very specific design for it, and a lot of LED lights everywhere. So yeah. I'm excited.
Gotta love that LED lights. Reminds me of Need for Speed Underground.
Exactly. Now, hopefully they just pulse or do some crazy strobing or something like that. And we'll be
just RGB effects entirely underneath the car, the entire race.
Suicide doors, because why not?
No, on a serious note, though, it is going to be telling. It is a little telling that of the 4 LMP3 manufacturers, only 2 have been chosen by the teams and the European Le Mans Series. We do not see any Ades, or is it Ginetta, which is the 3rd LMP3 manufacturer or 4th LMP3 manufacturer?
Ginetta, and then
and the Ades.
And the Ades.
On that note, interestingly, the first car to come down under for the planning to be raced in the LMP3 Australia series has been an ADES. So I was surprised by that, and we'll see how that turns out for those guys in that series. But it is also important to remember that the Duquesne cars are all carrying a weight penalty due to not being homologated on time. So we will see, at least for the first season, a little bit of hurt from the Duquesne cars, and that might sway the results a bit more into the Ligier bracket, you might expect.
Yeah. I think yes, especially because of that weight difference. Yeah, Ligier should probably it would be pretty shocking if they did not get some form of a dominant win just from that standpoint. I mean, who knows? Maybe not. But and again, the dynamic of these cars will be so different, where I'm used to the Ligiers not being as fast on the straights, but making a little bit of it up in the corners and being more of a stable car over the, but the, Duquesnes or, what previously, the previous one, like that was different.
Yeah.
Higher top speed Norma. I'm sorry. So
you should be. You should be.
A lot of different. Yeah. Well, you know what? I am. Whole lot of different machinery that we're going to be looking at too. So who knows kind of where the pace is going to lie for some of these cars, and we'll kind of find out with the prologue. But yeah, I mean, it's a little interesting not to see Ginetta there. Yeah. I kind of figure with the Desk, they're not going to be there just because they're much smaller outfit than anybody else. So they're only probably going to have 8 or 9, 10 cars running per year anyway. So that doesn't surprise me. But Ginetta, I thought they were going to have a lot more cars for sale, or at least being sold, or in the 20s at least. So to see them not having any there is kind of interesting. So
I think maybe especially at this time with what's happened this year, I don't think that a lot of teams would be committed to changing suppliers. And especially considering how competitive the Ligier and the Norma has been, like, why would you risk changing a supplier, even as a pseudo works outfit, when you're not sure about what the pace could be? So I can kind of see the logic behind that, but it is a little disheartening to not see any Ginettas make it to the grid. Speaking of the grid, though, there are a few usual suspects that we've come to see. United Autosports again returned with 2 cars. Wayne Boyd, Tom Gamble, Duncan Tappy amongst their drivers. Graf again with 2 cars. 1 Duquesne and 1 Ligier, interestingly. So you've got Trellier, Eric Trellier. I don't quite know how to pronounce that. San Juan and Page in one in the Duquesne, and then in the Ligier you have Capillier Robin and Arnold Robin and Maxime Robin. So I'm guessing that's brothers or father son or etc. Nielsen Racing are returning in with 2 cars, both Duquesnes. So we'll see Wells and Noble in 1 car yet again, and then Hodes, Grist, and Cruz in the other car. So continuing on from what they had last year in the ELMS and in the Asian Le Mans series. And then a few more of the big guns into Europol with only 1 car in LMP3 this season for the pairing of Moore and Hip. So there's 2 that we've been very familiar with seeing in LMP3 competition. And then I think another interesting one for me is the Michelin Le Mans Cup champions stepping up into the ELMS, Lawrence Hoare and Francois Kerman with DKR Engineering. So that'll be interesting to see how they go from the Michelin Le Mans Cup competition compared to the ELMS.
Yes. It's definitely going to be a lot more cars, but I don't know. I think the Le Mans Cup does a very good job of kind of giving everybody a good structure of what to expect. And, it is a step up. And there's going to be a lot more competition just from a competitive standpoint. But, I think they'll manage to do a good job. I think it won't be as, feel like the transition, especially in the Europe side, is a lot easier for some of these teams. They just make it easier. There's just there's more steps, so you're not taking as big ones.
Yeah, so that's a perfect analogy. And plus the fact that Le Mans Cup races with the European Le Mans Series paddock at every weekend is certainly a helpful, logistical It gives you certainly the logistical idea of what to expect, as well as sharing the track and being able to compare times and compare data with your European Le Mans Series counterparts as well. So it shouldn't be as much of a step, but it will still be interesting. Looking at that field, that 12-car field, do you want to make any predictions? I would be surprised if the Inter-Europol competition car doesn't take a podium, because they have been the standout performers in LMP3 for a few seasons. But they're not going to have it easy this year, I don't think. There's a lot of competition in that class.
Yeah, United Autosports looks pretty decent too. Just in terms of like where they've got some different drivers in there too, I think.
Yeah, there's a few changes. I don't recognize the names James Maguire or Robert Weldon.
Yeah.
So they're a few, and Andrew Bentley. So I think they're a trio of new drivers, but Boyd, Gamble, and Tappy are certainly
they're known. Yeah. But I just feel like the way that United Autosports has been operating, I feel like, especially with their LMP2 team switching to Oreca, this with the new Ligier, like I feel like they might be able to jump on this stuff a little bit quicker than others. But we'll see. Especially for their first round, though, it's got to be a Ligier car that you're going to pick, if anything.
Yeah, and we've already mentioned why that is, because of the added weight to the Ducanes, which is a bit of a shame, because I would have expected maybe even the Nielsen Racing or the Graf cars to have a bit more of a competition this year. So we'll see how that turns out, because I do quite like the Ducane and the Norma. I prefer that aesthetically. I prefer that over the Ligier, but that's just my personal opinion. The final class on the entry list is a 10-car GTE competition, featuring 7 Ferraris, 2 Porsches, and an Aston Martin returning to the ELMS class for the first time since 2017, I think, was the last time we saw Aston Martin racing, I think, in the TF Sport and Beechdean colours. We have 2 cars from Kessel Racing, 2 cars from Iron Lynx, which used to be Kessel Racing. I don't know. All the drivers from Kessel Racing have moved over to Iron Lynx. And then a Dempsey Proton car, a JMW Motorsport return, Spirit of Race, AF Corsa are in there. And the Aston Martin racing car is the basically the analog of what raced in the WEC. You've got PDL, Matthias Lauda, and Ross Gunn. So that's interesting to see them jump into the European Le Mans Series to get a bit more track time.
Yeah, and great to see.
Yeah.
Again, that gives us a little bit more different shapes to see on the GT side of things. So, and they will be one of will be one of my favorites to at least be up front and competing against some of the Ferraris here. Dempsey Proton will be solid. I mean, Proton Racing has always been solid. So, and then obviously just whether or not JMW, and I think, there's definitely Spirit of Race is going to be up there, and Kessel Racing has shown some life every now and then. So I think it's going to be a pretty good class, especially with how many entries there are too with this year. Definitely an uptick of entries for GT, I believe. So
yeah, well, in years past, we've seen GTE in European Le Mans Series fall to as low as 5 entrants. So to see 10 is a massive improvement. Pardon me. Important to note that in JMW Motorsport, they've seen a bunch of driver changes thanks to the travel restrictions. So they're fielding an all-British lineup of Jody Fannin, Finlay Hutchison, and Hunter Abbott, which are 3 drivers I've never heard of in my life before. If you're maybe a British GT fan, you might know who they are. Otherwise, a lot of, the usual suspects, Duncan Cameron, Matt Griffin, Aaron Scott in the Spirit of Race car. The Proton cars are interesting. On one hand, you have Christian Reed with Michele Beretta and Alessio Piccarello, which are 2 drivers I've not ever heard of before. Well, I've heard of Beretta, but not Piccarello. And then in the other Proton car, you have Felipe Lazer, which is a driver I've not heard of, paired up with FIA WEC GTE Pro winning Ricard Leitz. So that's a bit of a power couple.
Yeah, yes, power couple indeed. So, yeah, you can make, again, just for most of this field, you can make an argument for them having a strength somewhere, kind of in this against the rest of the field, or at least whether they can find an advantage in that somehow. Yeah. So, and again, just how evenly spread a lot of these entries are. Yes, they're down from ultimately where I think they probably would have been at the season started normally, but it's really, really comforting as a sports car fan to see that it's not, we're not talking about a really massive problem here, whereas where you could easily have made that argument a month ago. So
yeah, it is it's very encouraging to see. We're expecting something like less than 30 cars for ELMS at one point, but to see 37 come back to the grid is really, really encouraging. Just a quick note before we leave GTE behind. I think the Iron Lynx number 83 team, the all-female lineup, Gosner, Gadding, and Rahel Frey, they really impressed me last year, and I would not be surprised to see them consistently on the podium for this season. So keep an eye out for them, and they are going to be planning to go to Le Mans as well. But honestly, I can't go past the Aston Martin car. I think that's just much stronger than anything else in that field at the moment for GTE.
And yeah, you wouldn't find a huge argument for me either.
Yeah,
and it's that they are going to be a very, very good team to be going up against.
All in all, very, very exciting though to see ELMS back and to be back at Le Castellet. It's going to be hopefully a beautiful summer's day, and we'll see some great racing like we've come to expect from the European Le Mans series. And we've also made mention Michelin Le Mans Cup will be supporting them as well, so you'll see the full bill basically of a European Le Mans series weekend.
Yeah, I mean they've got like 34 or 35 somewhere on their entries. I mean it's going to be absolutely full of racing pretty much throughout the entire weekend, so I'm looking forward to it at least a lot.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be great. And on top of that as well, not only is the ELMS coming back this weekend, GT World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup starting up the following week. We'll briefly touch on that just to bring everyone up to speed. Unfortunately, okay, I'm going to give you the bad news first and then the good news. So unfortunately, GT World Challenge Europe has lost 22 cars across the Endurance and Sprint Cups due to COVID-19 and the logistical issues and pricing, etc., etc. On the plus side, though, there is still a field of 42 full-season GT3 cars. If I said to you, like, that's ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous.
Yes. 100%. And to boot too, I mean, with everything else going on, a lot of these, yes, they are pro-affiliated in terms of with their OEMs, but a lot of these are not the same caliber as some of these like ELMS and IMSA teams where there is this, massive structure behind it, and there's just like dedicated 100% behind this force. I mean, yeah, there are definitely those teams that are in here, but there's a lot of them that I just would not have expected to be able to show up here, and that's just really, really great to see, especially the amount of manufacturers too.
Yeah, it's a wide variety. Unfortunately, there have been some significant losses. So Motorsport have put a full halt on all their racing operations. So that's 3 Aston Martins that have been pulled from the series. There's been a injury to the Rinaldi Racing driver, so he's pulled that car, the 888 car. Both McLarens that had been slated for this series have moved back to British GT instead, which is unfortunate. And then a lot of the bigger teams have downsized, so WRT have gone down to 3 cars, Santalok down to 2. AMG has lost a few cars from a few different manufacturers. So, there's been a few casualties along the way, but to still see 42 cars slated for GT World Challenge Europe is pretty impressive. And I'm quite excited to see GT racing improper back on the grid very, very shortly. And I'm sure that there'll be a few of our subreddit members who are GT fans who are going to be very much looking forward to that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I'll be tuning in at least to watch quite a bit of that race just because, I'll want something else to watch. So, and it will be billed, and I will expect it to be just like it would be any other year, essentially, with just how tight the field is, how really talented a lot of the driver lineups are, the amount of overthinking engineers behind the pit wall. So I think it's going to be very, very good in terms of just a TV performance that you'll see from a sports car GT race. It'll be, I think it's going to be great.
And not only that, remember as well, the SRO probably has the best balanced performance in any racing series around the world. So not only is it going to be incredibly fascinating to watch in terms of what's going on behind the scenes, but the racing action is almost guaranteed to be phenomenal. So that's definitely something to look forward to as we approach the end of July. Exciting times in the world of sports cars, and not only in the world of sports cars, but in the world of racing as well, because not only do we have ELMS and IMSA this weekend, but we've also got the return of MotoGP, Super GT starting up again, F1 back for round 3, and V8 supercars as well. So basically, anything that tickles your fancy, you're going to have something to watch this weekend. And by God, that makes me so happy.
Oh, very happy.
So happy.
Muy bien.
Yes, exactly right. What are you most excited to see this weekend? There's also IndyCar on this weekend as well, so there's plenty going on. What are you most excited to see?
I mean, obviously IMSA, because hello.
Oh yeah, because you're going to IMSA. Oh god damn it.
Yeah, come on here. I'll be snapping some pictures, making some video, all that lovely stuff. But Hungarian Grand Prix is going to be a snooze, so no on that one. I'll be watching it, but I'm not really going to be that invested in it unless we have some weather.
Unless the Ferraris crash into each other again. What? No.
You could say that, but that apparently, they don't get cursed. They just get, blessings. Like you say like, okay, well, they're going to crash. And then they just like, you've actually blessed them. And you've not cursed them. You've blessed them. And they will now never crash for the next like 5 races. But anyway, IndyCar as well. I'm pretty excited about that. As just kind of looking forward to them kind of going from Road America and that kind of track, and then kind of like shifting gears to the next kind of round that's coming up. So
yeah, that'll be
like they have a jam-packed schedule of doing a lot of different kinds of racing coming up.
Yeah, so. Well, I think that's true for everything. I mean, you look at how much the schedules have been condensed across the board, and it's kind of terrifying. Pardon me, looking at how much racing we're going to be having in such a short amount of time. Like, looking at it, it's a little daunting, to be honest. There's so much racing coming up. And like, as I said, there's 5 different series that I'm going to be watching just this weekend that I want to watch. So yeah, we're going to become a slave to the motorsport machine in a second.
Hey, more power to it. NASCAR too. That's been rolling around as well for a bit, still for a while.
Yeah, that's on this weekend as well. See, there's no matter what you're into, there's racing on this weekend.
You'll have something, or at least like you'll have something to watch throughout the week next week.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that brings us to the end, unless there was any other pressing issues you wanted to talk about.
Just waiting a little bit more to see what happens with the whole COVID stuff, and then obviously with the aspect to that versus new announcements for cars, the DP, LMDH versus LMH, updates from that department. We're kind of in the dark, and I kind of expected that considering the circumstance. So I think hopefully I think the next time that we'll have one of these, I feel like we'll have more information from that. And I feel like just after Sebring, because that's kind of for IMSA, like they got these 2 races out, then they're going to wait a little bit. Like there might be some news, or at least there'll be some announcement and kind of keep everybody talking about IMSA a little bit more or something like that. I feel like you're going to at least get something coming up here where there's going to be something else to talk about. But yeah, I think right now it's just kind of making sure everything goes off without a hitch, and we don't have any more, these drivers that get diagnosed with having COVID before they get in the car. Felipe Nasr. So, but yeah, no, it was a solid weekend of racing when I went, and it's been really, really nice to be able to wake up on Sundays and Saturdays and watch race.
Oh my God. It's
very nice.
It's so nice. Unbelievably nice. Yeah, I'll echo the same sentiment. I hope that as we start to see things opening up again, that we experience these in the right way, and that there's no more significant issues that prevent people going racing and enjoying racing, because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, is going out and enjoying racing. And just before we finish off, I do want to make a little bit of a shout out. Of course, this podcast has been run through the WEC subreddit for the last, I think it's 5 years that we've been doing that now, which is a little scary to think about. But our good friends over on the Formula One subreddit just hit 1 million members, which is a very exciting time. So to all our friends over in the Formula One subreddit, the organizers there, the moderators there, and I know that some of you are listening. Congratulations on building something that has pulled in 1 million people. Like, holy crap!
Yeah. Now we just need our now we just need our own like Netflix series. And
yeah, well, you know what the funny thing is? I remember joining the Formula One subreddit when it had about the same number of members as WEC currently has. So maybe in 5 years' time we'll have 1 million members around the world.
Heck yeah, man!
No, I don't want to do that.
Get it?
Okay.
Oh man, yeah, that's a lot of human beings.
Yeah,
to all be in one spot. So I don't know how to do it.
No, neither do I. Good luck to them. On that note, thank you very much, Cookie, for joining me today. Best of luck over the weekend. Hope you have a nice, super happy, fun time.
Yeah, thank you. I will now indeed try to have a super happy, fun time. I was trying to have a super happy time, but I will definitely now add the fun part into it too. Thank you.
I'm glad I was able to remind you to add the fun.
Sometimes I forget that, and that's why you're here.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And thank you very much for listening. Once again, I'll plug all the bits. Follow us on Twitter. Open us up on YouTube now. We have a YouTube. You can listen to me and Kiwi commentate some sim racing series over there as well. And listen to us on Spotify or wherever you know the business by now. Anyway, that's it. I'm going back to bed. I'm Michael Zalavari. Peace out!
Gazoo!
That was a hot mess.
But it was our hot mess.
It was our hot mess, and for that I am thankful. Because I love getting into a hot mess with you.
It's like the best.
It is the best mess.